Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Debbie and I love sharing tips on how to save time and money. So don't forget to click subscribe and the bell so that you can be notified every time I post a new video. I love finding ways on how to save money, especially on groceries. So today I'd like to show you how just by keeping your freezer organized and running it effectively, you can save so much money on your grocery budget. In fact, when I started writing down all the tips that I wanted to share with you guys today, I had so many that I decided to split this video up into two separate parts. So this is part one. Now, just in case you're wondering, it doesn't matter what type of freezer you have. So whether you have a side-by-side or the freezer's on top, or you have a chest freezer or a deep freezer, I think is the same thing they call it, or like us where the freezer's on the bottom. It doesn't matter what type of freezer you have. What matters is how you use it. And in order to save time and money, just remember that organization is key. I'm sure we've all had that moment where you're at the supermarket and you have your list and you're thinking, I'm saving money because I'm only buying things that are on the list and I'm not buying anything else. And then you're either in the frozen vegetable aisle or you're in the meats or chicken section and you think to yourself, oh, I forgot to look in the freezer. Do I have it? Do I have enough to get me through the week? And you think, you know what? I'm not coming back here. I don't have time. Just in case, I'll buy chicken and hopefully I don't have any in the freezer, or vegetables or meat or fish, whatever it is. And you come home and you're thinking, I saved money. I didn't buy any junk. I only bought what's on my list. And then you open up the freezer and what's staring you in the face? Exactly what you bought, and you had enough for the whole week, and now you spent money that you didn't need to spend, and you're thinking, oh, I blew it. It happens to everyone. So what I like to do is divide my freezer into sections. So I'll have one section for the frozen vegetables, I'll have another section for the meats, chicken, and fish, and I'll have another section for my miscellaneous items. This way, with less than 30 seconds, I can look quickly at the freezer and know exactly what I have on hand and what I'm gonna need at the supermarket so that I can come up with my meal plan for the week and save as much money as possible. And if you don't know how to meal plan or you haven't seen my video, I'll link it in the card above and the description box down below. Now I'm sure that some of you have heard that in order to keep an efficient freezer or refrigerator, you should have a running list of everything that you have in it. I think that's a waste of time, and honestly, I like to make the most out of every minute that I have. So why am I gonna spend time making a list and keeping it on point and having to change it and cross things off and have my family do the same thing every time they take something out of the freezer? To me, that's ridiculous. I think that all you need to do is keep it organized so that you can once again look at it and see what you have, what you need, and what you can use right away. So now that you've organized your freezer, can it help you save even more money? Yes, it can. But before we get started, I have to show you what tools you need in order to get the job done. I'll leave a link to my vacuum sealer in the description box down below so that you can check it out. First of all, you're going to need some freezer bags. Now, it doesn't matter what type you buy, whether it's name brand or store brand. What matters is that you got it on sale. What I do is I wait for it to get to the rock bottom price, and if I've got a coupon, that makes it even better, and then I make sure to stock up. Now, it doesn't matter, again, what type you get. What matters is that it does say freezer on them, because if it doesn't, this isn't gonna work. Next, I went to the Dollar Tree and I picked up some trees. I picked up these round ones that I love because you can write on the top of them and you'll always know what's in there, and I'll go over that with you guys in a minute. And I also picked up these large square ones. Now, again, they all come with lids and they're great. You also need a permanent marker. And don't make my mistake where you write on the lid and you think you're being efficient, and then when you go to get it, you realize it got smudged and you probably can't even read it because you didn't use a permanent marker. Yeah, that's me. I've done that because I'm so tired. But anyway, And my biggest tool of all, which is my vacuum sealer. I love it. I've had it for so long. It has saved my family so much money on groceries. And it's small and discreet. I keep it in the cabinet in the corner. And if you want to check out the one that I use, I'll leave a link in the description box down below. So now that you've got these tools in hand, I want to share with you my 10 tips on how to save time and money by using your freezer. Let's get started. Tip number 1, please don't judge me. But have you ever heard of no waste cooking or no food waste cooking? Well, what I do is whenever I'm prepping vegetables like shaving carrots or cutting the ends of zucchini or cutting into an onion or the ends of garlic, what I do is I put it all in a Ziploc bag and I keep it in the freezer. Here, let me show you. Now, what do I do with it? Well, now that the bag is full, I'm going to place it in my crock pot and fill it with water and leave it in there overnight at the lowest setting that I can. And I actually make vegetable stock from it. And what can I use vegetable stock for? Well, I use it for deglazing any kind of pan or flavoring some rice or even making soup. And I actually got this tip before you start saying, "Ew, Debbie, that's so gross." I got the tip from a friend of mine who was at a culinary institute and is actually now a chef. He says that restaurants do this to save as much money as they can. And honestly, it adds nutrients to food. And I then place the extra that I don't use in a Tupperware in the refrigerator for a few days. Or you can either buy mason jars, or what I do is I recycle my plastic bottles and jars, like your spaghetti sauce or your salsa jars, and I just rinse them off, and these are perfect. I put any liquid in these and make sure to label the top, and I put it in the freezer. And that way, anytime I need to make a soup or flavor some rice, I can just take this out and use it, put it in the fridge for a few days, and make sure that I use the rest of it. And that way, no food goes to waste. And one tip I do have for you is if you're going to use either a mason jar or a glass jar, or in this case, a plastic bottle, just make sure to not fill it to the top, because liquid expands when it freezes, and the last thing you want to do is open up the freezer and find it everywhere. Pieces of glass and plastic just everywhere. It's a mess. It gets sticky and it's disgusting, and then you have to clean out your freezer, and then you also got rid of something that you could have really used. Tip number 2 has to do with salt and added preservatives. Now, anytime possible, I like to eliminate salt altogether because I want to be able to flavor the food that I'm making my way and be able to control that as much as possible. And any time that I can eliminate preservatives altogether, I'm all about that. So in this case, I'm going to talk to you about beans. Why am I going to go and buy a can of beans that can be up to $1 when I can, for less than $2, buy a bag of beans? Now, it doesn't matter if it's kidney, black beans, any kind of beans at all. What I do is I bring the bag home, and whenever I know I'm gonna make meals for that week or coming up that require beans, I give them a rinse. I put them in what? My slow cooker. That's right. And I fill it with water, not to the top because you don't want it to boil over. And I set it on low for about 6 hours. Depending on the kind of bean, you might want to check it at the 4-hour mark just to make sure you don't overcook it. And then whatever beans I'm going to use for within a few days, like 5 days, I put it in a Tupperware container and put it in my fridge. And the rest of them, I pre-portion the size in my vacuum sealer, and I label them as to when I vacuum sealed it and what kind of bean it is, and I put it in the freezer. Let me show you. This way, it's so easy whenever I'm gonna make a meal that requires beans. Instead of opening up a can and having that added salt and preservatives, I have these that I can just put in the sink and put a little bit of warm water on, and within minutes it completely defrosts. And even if it's not completely defrosted, I still add it into my meals as well, because it'll cook with it and it'll be just fine, because I made sure not to overcook them in my slow cooker. And once again, I've used my vacuum seal. I can have this in the freezer for months and it won't get affected at all. Tip number 3 is to cook once and eat twice. What I mean by this is anytime I'm making a meal that I know my family loves and it's everyone's favorite, if I have enough ingredients on hand to make twice as much, I do, because it doesn't take much longer time-wise to cook the same meal twice. Just combine everything in the same pot and just make extra. And also, it doesn't cost me any more money because I had the ingredients on hand and I didn't have to run to the supermarket to get anything else. So what I do is the one batch I serve to my family, and anything extra I put in the fridge. And the second batch, what I do is I put it in the containers that I got at the Dollar Tree, these right here. And I will not only use the lid that comes with it, but before I put the lid on, I put a layer of plastic wrap around it. And then I use the lids, and if you get ones that don't have lids, you can wrap it with aluminum foil on top. And then with your permanent marker, write down exactly what you made and what the heating instructions are once it's defrosted, whether it's a casserole that you're putting in or lasagna that you're putting into the oven. And this way, whenever you're in a rush, you don't have to think to yourself, wait a minute, let me find that recipe, let me remember what temperature the oven is and how long it's there. You don't have to worry about a thing because it's all written down on the container. So what I do is whenever I'm gonna use these, I take it out the night before and either leave it on the counter for an hour or so, or even better is the night before I take it out and I put it in my fridge. And then this way, that morning, I already know that when I come home, I'm gonna have a fresh meal that I just need to pop in the oven, and the directions are right on top. So it saves me time, saves me money, and we get a fresh meal instead of getting any kind of takeout. So it's a win-win. Tip number 4 has to do with leftovers. Now, have you ever made a meal and everyone loved it, and then you put it in containers in the fridge, and a day or 2 or even 3 go by and you realize no one's eating it, we've moved on to other meals, or this week I know no one's gonna touch it and I don't want it to go bad. So what can you do to save money and time? Well, you can use your vacuum sealer. That's right, let me show you. This, for example, is the chili that I made last month. And I made so much of it that before it went bad, I took some and I vacuum sealed it and I labeled it and I put it in the freezer. Now for the next 6 months or so, it's fresh, it's available to me, and yet it's another reason why I don't order takeout and spend more money, because I've got a meal right here. Tip number 5 has to do with cooked meat. That's right. Whatever meat you make, it doesn't matter what kind it is, if you take it and whatever you don't eat that night, you vacuum seal it and label it, of course, and put it in the freezer, it's available to you anytime you need it. I think I give it no more than like 4 to 5 months, and then I'd check the quality of it. But vacuum sealing really does extend the shelf life to any food at all. Now, what I do is any kind of ground meat that I have in the freezer, I'll defrost it, whether it's pork or chicken, turkey, beef, it doesn't matter. If I'm making tacos, I put it in the pan and I use my own taco blend seasoning that I make my own just so I can control the salt. And then whenever we eat the tacos within a few days, I make sure that whatever's left over goes right vacuum sealed, labeled, and in the freezer, because I don't want anything to go bad in the fridge, because that's wasted money. And again, it's another quick meal that I can make that I don't have to get takeout or pizza or anything else and spend more money. It's there, it's quick, and I can do it real fast. What I normally do for that is I'll break it up in the vacuum sealed bag a little bit and then cut it open, add just a little bit of oil to the pan, put the meat back in. All you're really doing is warming it up and it tastes as if you just made it. It's so fresh and so good, and the kids and my family love it. Tip number 6 has to do with vegetables. Any vegetable combination or any kind of vegetable that you see in the freezer section of the supermarket, you can make yourself and save money. What I like to do is whenever I stock up on a vegetable that I'm gonna make that week, if it's at its rock bottom price, and you can really tell just by looking at it, like right now, broccoli was like almost $2 a pound. I'm like, no, I don't think so. But whenever any vegetable is at its rock bottom price, instead of buying enough to make for your family for the week, I actually double it. So one I'll keep in the fridge to make for the week. The other one, I either, you clean it up and you can steam it or you can boil it. For example, with broccoli, I place it in a pot of boiling water, and it's just for a few minutes, just for it to turn bright green. Once it turns bright green, I know it's done. I take it out, I drain it, I let it cool. That's a key thing, is to let it cool. And then either vacuum seal it or put it in a freezer bag, make sure to label it, and put it in the freezer. And that way, anytime that you need a vegetable on hand, if you don't have anything fresh in the fridge, or if all the vegetables that you want to make are high in cost that week, instead of spending money on anything that's not on sale, or sometimes the price is jacked up, you go right in your freezer, you take that vegetable out, you let it thaw on your kitchen counter or in your sink just enough to just get the ice out, and then add it to any meal, cook it up any way you normally do, and you have a fresh vegetable anytime you want. How healthy is that? Tip number 7 has to do with fresh fruit. Now, if you're at the supermarket, just like I just told you with the vegetables, and you see your favorite fruit and the price is so rock bottom, you know you can't walk away from it, even if you know you're not going to go through it, what you do is whatever you bought in excess, you clean it, chop it up the way you normally would eat it, and you vacuum seal it, or you put it in a freezer bag and make sure to label it, and you put it in the freezer. Now, whenever you have people coming over and you want to make smoothies, it's there. What I like to do is anytime I'm having friends over and I'm having, for example, any kind of cocktail, any kind of fruity cocktail, like I made some watermelon margaritas for my girlfriends the other day. I took out some watermelon that I had sliced up in the freezer, and I defrosted enough just to make a little rim with it, and I put it right on the rim of the glass, and they thought it was the fanciest thing ever. But meanwhile, I'm being frugal and saving money and making the most out of every dollar that I have. Another thing that I like to do is, I know you've heard the tip of freezing bananas because it makes great banana bread, which it does. But again, it's not the best calorie-wise for my family, so it is a treat that I'll make every once in a while. And of course, if I'm gonna make it, I'm gonna add some chocolate chips to it too. But one healthy meal that I like to make is actually a dessert with the bananas. Let me show you what I do. So what I do is I cut up the bananas and I put them in a cookie sheet and put it in the freezer. And it's called flash freezing, in case you haven't heard of it. And then the next day I take them off the cookie sheet and put them in this bag and I freeze it. And what's good about using a Ziploc bag or any kind of freezer bag for this is that you can continue to open it and add to it without having to reseal the bag if you use a vacuum sealed bag. What I actually do with the bananas is I make vanilla ice cream. And it's so healthy, and the kids think it's vanilla ice cream, and it comes out tasting so much like it. It's great. And if you want that recipe, let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll make a separate video about that. Tip number 8 has to do with leftover wine. Now, when I told my best friend this tip, she said to me, "Leftover wine, Debbie? What is that? What does that mean?" Well, in my house, I do have leftover wine every once in a while because my husband doesn't drink, and I only like to have a glass every now and then. So wine does actually go bad, in case you didn't know. So what I do is whenever I know I'm not gonna finish the bottle, which is always, I actually freeze the rest in ice cube trays. And what's great is, especially if you really like a certain type of wine, is whenever you have family or friends over and you want to serve your wine, instead of putting ice cubes in it that will only water down the alcohol, you put the wine ice cubes in it. So it's the same alcohol that's in the glass. Your alcohol never gets watered down, and it stays nice and fresh for you the whole time. Now, my neighbor actually took it one step further. I told her about the wine trick as well as the frozen fruit trick. So what did she do? She brought me a glass of sangria, and it was delicious. I said to her, you have to give me the recipe. And she said, Debbie, I literally took the frozen fruit you told me and the ice cubes of wine, added some more wine to it, and I made my own sangria. I think she put some kind of seltzer or something in it as well. I don't know, I still have to get the recipe. But she made the most out of 2 frugal tips, and it was amazing. Tip number 9 has to do with chicken, steak, and fish. Have you ever been at the supermarket and you see those huge family packs of chicken, fish, or steak, and you think to yourself, that's really a great price, it's on sale, but I don't use that much, or I'm not going to use that much and it's going to go bad. Or whether you live by yourself, or you have a small family, or you just are eating more vegetables than you are protein, you still should buy the pack. And let me tell you why. Because if it's on sale, it makes sense. What you do is when you bring it home, you do not put it in the freezer. Instead, section it off as to how much you would actually use in a meal. So if you live by yourself and you're only going to use one piece, vacuum seal each piece individually. If you're going to use it for 3 members of your family, then take 3 of them and vacuum seal them separately. Just make sure to label it before you put it in the freezer. Now, why am I saying vacuum seal it instead of putting it in a freezer bag? Because we've all had that instance where you go in the freezer and you pull out chicken, fish, or steak, and you look at it and it's got freezer burn on it, and you're like, oh my God, I just threw away money. I forgot I had that in there, which again is one of the reasons why you want to keep your freezer organized. But if you see that and it has freezer burn in it, you have to throw it out because you don't want to get anyone sick or be sick yourself. And you just threw money in the garbage. It irritates me. But anyway, so that's why you want to vacuum seal it, because vacuum sealing it adds months to it. And when you defrost it, it tastes as if you just bought it fresh from the supermarket. It's amazing. And again, if you want to see the one that I use, I'll link it in the description box down below. And my last and final tip for this video is tip number 10, which has to do with bread. Now, I buy 100% whole wheat bread for my family, and it's mostly for the kids for their sandwiches for lunch. And of course, like any typical kid, they don't like the ends of bread. Now, whenever I get a chance to make myself a sandwich, I'll use the bread ends, of course, because I don't care. But whenever I don't get a chance to use it, what I do is I put it in a freezer bag. And why a freezer bag and not a vacuum seal bag? Because again, I want to continue to add more bread ends to the bag until the bag is full. And this way I save by not having to cut open the vacuum seal bags and use the vacuum seal bags when I have the freezer bag instead. And let me show you what that looks like. So as you can tell, the bag is now full. So what I do with this is I put it in my food processor and I add a little bit of Parmesan cheese and some Italian seasoning, and I do what? I make breadcrumbs. That's right. I actually have a bag here to show you as well. Now the consistency isn't the same, but again, I'm not wasting any food, and with that, money as well. So what I do with these breadcrumbs is I can put them in meatballs and in meatloaf and in burgers, but I wouldn't bread chicken or steak or anything and then put it in a frying pan with a little bit of oil, because it's not the same consistency as like panko breadcrumbs, and it gets a little mushy when it's heated that way. But again, it makes a great addition to meatloaf and burgers and my meatballs, and no one can tell the difference. And I'm actually adding a little bit of healthier ingredients into it because it's 100% whole wheat bread. Also, you can freeze breadcrumbs that you buy at the supermarket as well. They stay fresher in the freezer. In my next video, I'll share with you guys tips 11 through 20. And I think I'll still be able to surprise you as to how else to stretch your food budget by using your freezer. Do you have any tips on how you use your freezer to save money? Please leave them in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear from you. Well, I hope you liked this video and found it helpful. If you did, please click the like button, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe and click on that bell. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!